Welcome to another RoboCast Deep Dive, coming to you from the mind of Daniel David Allen. Today we're going to be looking at a layoff culture.
Specifically in tech.
Yeah, particularly in tech.
Yeah.
It's something that's been in the headlines a lot lately, and it's sparking a lot of outrage, rightfully so.
Yeah, I think there are serious questions here about leadership, ethics,
Yeah.
even basic human decency.
It's just wild to me. I mean, we've got these companies, these supposed innovators. They're out there slashing jobs left and right. But at the same time, their CEOs are, getting these massive raises. I mean, it's ABC News even has the data on this. Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta, Uber, Salesforce.
All the big ones.
All the big ones. All seeing those CEOs get raises before or even during major layoffs.
It really makes you wonder where their priorities lie.
Yeah.
Are these companies really in such dire straits, or are they just,
Right.
Throwing their employees under the bus to appease shareholders and,
To boost those quarterly earnings reports.
Yeah.
And that's what gets me so fired up about this whole thing. We're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet. These are people's lives.
Right.
I mean, remember that anecdote from the "Every layoff is a failure of leadership" article?
Yeah.
The guy who got laid off the week after Thanksgiving.
Wow. Brutal.
Brutal. And then to see the company reposting almost the same job description just a few days later,
Yeah.
it's just heartless.
Yeah, and that story, I think, really highlights the human cost of these decisions. It's not just...
It's not just a number.
It's, it's stress, it's financial instability, emotional turmoil, and it's not just the individual who gets laid off.
Yeah.
It's their family, their community.
And all the people they work with.
Yes.
There's that, that turnover contagion effect they were talking about. And layoffs are usually a sign of bad leadership.
Right, yeah.
So after a round of layoffs, even the people who kept their jobs are like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Am I next? I'm out of here. Or if they stay, they've got twice the work now.
Right,
Because they got to pick up the slack. And it's just like this self-inflicted wound.
It's fascinating because it really works against what companies are trying to do when they have layoffs.
Like what?
They say, we need to streamline, we need to be more efficient.
Right.
But you're losing talent, you're losing institutional knowledge.
All the things you can't just buy back.
Yeah, morale plummets, and that all eventually impacts your bottom line.
So if layoffs sort of backfire in the long run and cause so much pain in the short term,
Right.
why are they so prevalent? I mean, one of our sources goes so far as to say, like point blank,
Yeah.
every layoff is a failure of leadership.
That's a strong statement.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of truth to it. I always think of it like a game of Jenga,
Yeah.
Each layoff is like pulling out one of those blocks from the company's foundation. And a good leader understands the structure and finds ways to reinforce it.
Not weaken it.
Exactly.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what about situations where it seems like layoffs are unavoidable? Like, after a merger or an acquisition.
Right.
The article about alternatives did mention that as sort of a caveat.
You're right to bring that up. Mergers and acquisitions definitely can lead to redundancies and restructuring. But even then, I think the need for layoffs often points back to a failure of leadership before the merger.
Oh, interesting.
Either the leadership teams didn't do their due diligence and anticipate the challenges, or they just prioritized those short-term cost savings over the well-being of the workforce in the long run.
Yeah, so even when it seems inevitable, there's still an element of leadership failure in there somewhere.
I think so, yeah.
So let's say we're in a situation, though, where a company's really struggling. They need to make cuts. Are there other things they can do besides just handing out pink slips?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, good.
There are so many alternatives, and that's what I think it's really interesting. Layoffs are usually a sign of bad leadership. Has this whole toolkit of options.
Right.
We'll dig into those in a minute, but I'm curious what comes to your mind. Like, if you were at the helm, what would you do before resorting to layoffs? Too often, it feels like layoffs are just the default, the easy way out.
Right. Just cut people.
Exactly. But when in reality, that's often the most damaging option and the least effective in the long run.
Okay, so let's get into some of those alternatives. The article mentioned things like hiring freezes and retraining programs. Those seem pretty straightforward.
Yeah, those are definitely good starting points. So instead of immediately resorting to cutting jobs, you can put a freeze on hiring.
Right.
Which slows down growth and gives the company some breathing room to kind of reassess their needs. And then retraining programs, those can help you take your existing talent, people who already know the company culture, and repurpose them, train them for new roles, maybe in a different department.
So you're not losing those skills.
Exactly. Instead of letting go of skilled workers and then having to hire and train new ones.
Right, it's right.
It's just more efficient.
That makes sense. But those feel kind of, I don't know, incremental. Like, what if the company needs to make some serious cuts? Like, really slash expenses?
Well, even then, I think there are more creative, more humane approaches than mass layoffs.
Okay, like what?
Well, what about tapping into the collective wisdom of your own employees? Like, why not crowdsource cost-saving ideas?
Ooh, I like that.
Right.
That's empowering.
Yeah.
Makes them feel like part of the solution.
Exactly. Instead of just victims, right?
Yeah.
And think about it. Your employees are the ones on the front lines, the ones who really know the day-to-day operations.
Mm-hmm.
They might have insights into inefficiencies, places where you could trim costs that leadership wouldn't even think of.
It's like that whole boots on the ground perspective. This is making me think about that CEO pay thing we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Like, you've got these executives making millions, sometimes billions, while their employees are struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And then those same executives turn around and lay off those employees.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, economic headwinds or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It just feels so morally bankrupt.
It's a huge disconnect between their actions and their words, Like, how can you expect your employees to believe in the we're all in this together narrative when you're protecting your own lifestyle and cutting their livelihoods?
And it's not just about the optics,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that kind of behavior really erodes trust, destroys morale, and just creates a toxic work environment.
Exactly.
Like, who wants to give their all to a company that clearly doesn't value them?
You're hitting on such a crucial point there.
Yeah.
Because the impact of layoffs goes way beyond the immediate financial consequences,
Yeah.
It's a psychological impact on everyone. It damages the company's reputation. And in the long run, you lose valuable talent, expertise, all that institutional knowledge. It's hard to bounce back from that.
It's almost like we've just, as a society, I don't know, accepted this culture of disposability in the workplace.
It's true.
Like, we've become so used to hearing about these mass layoffs that it's just...
It's lost its shock value.
Yeah. That's dangerous, I think.
It is dangerous. Because when we normalize these practices, we become complicit in a system that's putting profits over people.
Yeah.
We need to start questioning this, demanding better from our leaders.
Absolutely. And speaking of questioning the status quo, like, let's go back to that CEO pay thing, because it's not just about the bad optics of these massive compensation packages during layoffs.
Right.
It's about the system that allows this vast income inequality in the first place.
Yeah, you're absolutely right to bring that up. This is bigger than any one CEO. It's a systemic issue.
Right.
We need to be looking at shareholder pressure, this constant need for quarterly earnings growth.
Mm-hmm.
These perverse incentives that reward short-term thinking and cost-cutting over long-term sustainability and employee well-being.
It feels like the system is rigged against the average worker.
Yeah.
Like, they're the ones who always bear the brunt of economic downturns,
Mm-hmm.
while those at the top just seem to be insulated.
Just like that saying, the rich get richer.
And then the poor get pink slips.
Yeah, exactly. It's cynical, but it's true a lot of the time.
So how do we change this? Like, how do we break out of this cycle of disposability? How do we create a more humane, more sustainable work environment?
It's not going to be easy.
Right.
It requires a shift in mindset.
Okay.
At the individual level, at the societal level. We need to start valuing people over profits, long-term sustainability over short-term gains, and collaborative solutions instead of just top-down mandates.
I mean, those are all great goals, but how do we get there? What are some concrete things we can do? Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
The human cost, the leadership failures, the broken system.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it can feel kind of overwhelming. Like, what can we actually do about all of this?
You're right. It can be daunting, but every movement starts with individual actions.
Okay.
It's those ripples that create change.
So let's brainstorm here. What are some things our listeners can do, like tangible steps to push back against this layoff culture?
Well, first off, knowledge is power.
Right.
Share these articles, these stories, these alternatives we've been talking about.
Get the word out.
Exactly. Get people talking, raise awareness.
Yeah.
Because the more people understand what's really going on,
Mm-hmm.
the more likely we are to see real change.
Okay, so spread the word. And, I mean, social media is a great tool for this.
Oh, yeah.
Don't just share articles, though.
Yeah.
Call out these companies who are engaging in, unethical layoff practices.
Name and shame.
Yeah. Use those hashtags. Tag the CEOs, make some noise.
Make it a PR nightmare for companies who treat their employees like they're disposable.
And don't forget about the power of the wallet.
Oh, that's a good one.
Support businesses that actually align with your values.
Yeah.
Like, do your research, see how they treat their workers.
Exactly.
I was reading about this idea of voting with your dollars.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making those conscious choices to support businesses that actually prioritize their workforce.
That's a great point. And it applies not just to consumer choices, but to investments, too.
Oh, yeah, right.
More and more people are looking for investments that align with their values.
Socially responsible investing and all that.
Yes, exactly. So if you're employed right now, don't be afraid to speak up at your own company.
Yeah, raise your voice.
Advocate for alternatives to layoffs. Suggest some of the solutions we've talked about today.
Be that squeaky wheel.
Yeah. Push for more transparency from leadership. Encourage open dialogue.
You might be surprised at the impact you can have.
And there's strength in numbers, too, right?
Yes.
Like, support those organizations that are fighting for workers' rights.
Absolutely.
Pushing for better severance packages, providing resources for people who've been laid off.
There's power in collective action, for sure.
Yeah. And remember, you've got a voice in the political arena, too.
Oh, that's a big one.
Do your research. Look at where the candidates stand on these issues. Support the ones who are prioritizing workers' rights.
And responsible economic policies.
Yeah. So it's about being informed, speaking out, making those conscious choices, supporting those worker-friendly organizations,
Yeah.
and voting for leaders who get it.
It's a multi-pronged approach, really.
Yeah.
We got to tackle this thing from all sides.
It's not going to be easy, but
But it's a fight worth having.
it is. I think we need to remind ourselves that a company's real strength,
Yeah.
it's in its people,
Beautifully said.
not just its profits.
When we prioritize people, we create a better world for everyone. A more just world, a more equitable world, and ultimately, I think, a more successful world.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the dark side of layoff culture.
Yeah.
It's been heavy,
Yeah.
but I hope it's also been a little bit empowering.
Me too.
Because we can make a difference if we all work together.
Absolutely. The fight for a better workplace continues.
It does. And if you found this deep dive thought-provoking, please share it around, friends, colleagues, anyone who might benefit from this conversation.
Spread the word.
Yeah, and you can find this deep dive and others just like it right here on the Daniel David Allen YouTube channel.
That's right.
That's RoboCast.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged.
And keep fighting the good fight.
We'll see you next time.